So Mason, how was Philly?
It was pretty good.
Yeah? Did you get any
Yeah.
cheesesteaks or are they overrated?
Man, I didn't have much time for tourism at all. It was pretty much like up there, tournament, come back.
Really?
Pizza was pretty
That
good
quick?
though. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the last time I was in Philly must have been like several months ago. Um, and I went to get one of those cheesesteaks and it was kind of underwhelming at best.
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, we have a stream to talk to, like an actual real, a lot of very interesting people here together last minute. We're going to be talking about the new Switch mechanic on that Niantic just pulled on us for Pokemon Go. Um,
Let me know if you can hear me okay.
I hear you loud and clear. Is that
Awesome.
Kakuna?
Yep.
Okay. Um, but our real goal here is to be constructive in our criticism and hopefully influence some kind of change, as opposed to just being a rant for an hour. Of course, we are
Yeah.
live, right?
And I did see on Twitter that Niantic support tweeted about, well, general PvP issues, but I think there's an opportunity to bring their attention to
Mm-hmm.
some of the
But
stuff we'll probably talk about on
we're
stream.
we're also going to be a little bit realistic here in the fact that this is also kind of an outlet for people to vent a little bit as long as they're respectful in their venting, because people are frustrated and people understand like the game. You have to be thinking. So we're going to try to include those viewers as much as possible, and we're going to be using a hashtag that just started on Twitter. It's called hashtag Save PvP. And so we're going to address those questions later within the stream, and we'll be monitoring any questions on Twitter that have that hashtag, and hopefully bringing them up if as long as they're respectful and relevant. So with that being said, I'll just jump right into this. We have a lot of people here. I'm going to do like a quick intro, and then I know a lot of people are going to be joining in later on. We have Kakuna Matata from PvPoke, Flark Fiasco, who has joined us. He's sort of spearheaded this movement in a sense, so we're very interested to see what he has to say about this. Valor Ash, um, formerly number one PvP Self Arena rank in the world. Is that right? You just got taken down by an Argentinian.
Yeah. Number 2 now. My boys
Awesome.
in Argentina, they're gonna take the crown this season.
Caleb Pang, also a very high ranked player. He brought us the whole Lugia regionals. Peace, love, hugs. A fellow Houstonian, also a finalist in the North American Champions. We also have Scotty, who's our leader here in Ghost Stadium, B Gold, and again, other people might be joining in later on, and we're just going to. It's a less formal discussion. I'll be asking these questions, and then directed at someone, and then everybody else is welcome to hop in and give their 2 cents. But again, we're trying to be constructive here. So the first thing is we got to explain what exactly happened with this new feature. I'm going to ask this question to Mason. I just want you to just explain what the Switch mechanics were like before and what they're like now. What exactly changed?
So the old Switch mechanics allowed for a little bit more skill to come into play. It would actually help you move away from like the rock paper scissors feel, as you could switch Pokemon into like eating charge attacks that would be not very effective, and you could essentially neutralize your opponent's charge attack, or call it like a third shield, if you will. You could even do that late game with like a 2% or like a 2 HP Pokemon, swap it in, eat a charge move, have it die, and then continue on with the Pokemon you have in back. But with the new Switch mechanic, it really slows the game down and makes it choppier to where you don't have the same fluid battle anymore. Your lineup becomes even more important in battle, and it's less about the skill necessarily of the player in battle. So the importance of skill and the ability to demonstrate and use skill in PvP has, I would say, drastically decreased. Whereas the importance of like the Pokemon that you bring to battle is pretty much going to make or break you. Whereas before you could play around it.
Right. So specifically, what was the mechanic like before when you switched out Amon? It was pretty much instant, right? There was no cooldown.
There was no cooldown. It required you to like think on your feet, and it required very, very fast-paced thinking, like split-second decisions. Like for example, you can't be late to switch into a Vigoroth in jungle, because if he gets a little bit of an energy advantage, then your counters can start to struggle with doing their job, which is countering Venomoth or countering Vigoroth.
Okay, so
it just made everything slower and choppier.
So one like really, really popular example for those of you who watched the Dortmund Champions, there was a really epic moment where King and Zionic were commentating, and it was coming down to the last lineup where someone was able to sacrifice their Altaria and use it as a shield last minute, and then take out the final boosted Medicham with the victory bell. I mean, with their victory bell. I believe we have a clip for this, Quartz. When you get a minute, go ahead and show that on stream, because this is an example of something that would not be able to, would not be able to change, would not be able to happen in future tournaments. So that's how it was. Mason, if you could give us, I guess, the quick and dirty of how it works now. What exactly is going on right now?
So now when you switch, you don't have the opportunity to eat charge attacks anymore with your switching, and when any player hits the switch button, it completely freezes the game, or pauses the game, I should say, in that you have, I believe 10 seconds to choose which Pokemon you're going to switch in. And so it takes a lot of the like on your feet critical thinking out of the game, and it slows the pace of the game down now. But essentially, it gives you more time to think with your options and how you're going to answer it, and it makes your matches more cut and dry in stone. Whereas previously, you could work around your bad matchups with a little bit of an energy advantage if you had switched in.
Right. So for those of you watching the video, again, like this is kind of an example that boosted Medicham would have easily taken out that Victreebel with the Ice Punch. But now, what would have happened in that video is that as soon as the Altaria swapped in, Medicham would have a cooldown and would just take it out with a counter and just finish Victreebel with an Ice Punch. So it kind of takes a pretty huge strategic element out of the game that we used to have. So I guess, I'll open that up to the positive aspects of this, the mechanic the way it is now. I think it's important to think about it in those terms, because from a developer standpoint, when they introduce a feature or they change something, it's either because they've identified a problem with a current feature, or perhaps they're trying to improve it in any way because they think, well, this is a feature that's even better. So what would be the best argument in favor of this new switch mechanic? And I'm going to direct this question to...
Can I take this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, so, all right, if I understand correctly, based on what's up on the screen right now, you can see that they are talking about giving more time to switch, which reduces the barrier to entry for the game. I know a lot of us here in the Go Stadium are like, for hardcore, right? But there's also people that aren't. And I play tournaments with them too. You know, locally, like I go there, and there's just people that like to be there and like to have fun. They get really frustrated. I've 2-0'd people sometimes, or I would have, you know, like it was looking like it, but maybe like after like the first game or something, they're just like, you know what, I'm just gonna report that you won. Like they don't even want to play it out because they're so frustrated with like the Switch or something, you know, like it's just not working. And so I've seen a lot of people that are almost as frustrated as some people are now with the change. So there's kind of some pros and cons, but when they talk about giving more time, I think that definitely happened. They achieved that, but avoiding the damage caused to each other while they're withdrawn in the Pokeballs, that still happens. You know, like I was just watching King's video. He was doing some practice with the new one, and he was trying to farm against a Vigoroth before getting hit with a Body Slam, and he got pretty ambitious. He got 3 counters in, and then he got hit with a Body Slam, and it's 5. Vigoroth needs 5. So where did the 2 counters come from? They came from inside the Pokeball. They came from the screen transition. They came from the camera flipping around like crazy. So I mean, this phantom damage is still happening. Like the battle, if you're gonna pause the battle, maybe like have the battle paused until both of them are like sitting there, and then like resume, so that you can like count moves or whatever you want to do, right? Like but I can see why that also was frustrating. Like that I need to like be spamming my screen while the camera's flying around because apparently I'm doing damage. Like most people don't know that if they're casual.
So the idea is kind of open it up to casuals in a certain respect. Do you think,
I think so.
in tournaments, perhaps this switch mechanic is the defining factor in being able to beat a more casual player?
No. I mean, it's another aspect. Like it's another layer of skill that you can use to beat a casual player if you're skilled, but I don't think it's the deciding factor. It's not like, oh, now they have a chance against Valarash, right? Like they still don't. So like there's not but what is important though is the leads are so much more important. So for people that want to build a team of like hard counters or something, you know, that is just like really good against one guy, if they get lucky, yeah, they can like sweep a whole tournament, technically. If they always win that rock, paper, scissors at the beginning, it's very hard to stop. Because as soon as you swap in, you can just smack that switch button and switch on over.
So I'm hearing the casuals argument for sure. I would also maybe challenge that specific argument because, you know, how many casuals are you going to really get long term if you start to decrease the popularity from the competitive aspect? You know, if players that are really competitive, that they're perhaps, you know, going to get really engaged and spend a lot of hours dissecting the meta, might not be so interested anymore, and then that also affects casuals, right?
Yeah. Well, I think tournament attendance. So how many people show up to a local tournament? Because really, I mean, sure, we got remote leagues here and Go Stadium, but like the bulk of this is, you know, from the Silph Arena stuff is PvP is taking place in local tournament. That's like the most fun, you know, like show up, everybody's there. Like that's what we all like to do, if we can. And like if you have half of your player base not showing up anymore, then you may not have enough players to even do a tournament. Some places are already struggling to do tournament. So I mean, if somebody just wants to like switch games or something or whatever because of this or maybe other changes down the road, one of the I think main things we want to do here is not only have just a candid discourse about this change, but about how we can respond as a community to changes, if they're good or bad.
Yeah. And I'm going to open this up to all of you guys that are in the call here. What other advantages do you see of making a change in this direction as far as the intent of this feature?
AJ, this is Peace, Love, Hugs. While I was practicing with one of my friends earlier today, as far as the skill component, I actually got baited into a bad charge move because he used the false switch where you pull the Pokemon back and throw it back out. So I don't necessarily think that skill got removed entirely, I'm like everything that we've learned up to this point as far as switch mechanics go, we kind of have to move on from it and figure out what kind of what this mechanics are doing. So a lot of what I've been doing lately as far as in-game is trying to push the limits of the switch mechanic and trying to see what's and play around with it. It's like Mason said, it's very choppy, so that part's really frustrating. And obviously the bugs are bugs, but hopefully those will get fixed over time, and I trust in the next patch some of those will be taken care of.
Do you think that's a feature that they could have had in the old Switch system? Like to just switch to the same guy? I mean, right?
No, because we would have when we opened the menu. Well, I guess we could have.
Yeah, I mean, if you open the menu and your you know, Metacham's right there, and then you click Metacham again, it's like, come back, Metacham again, pulled a fast one on you. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's that. I don't think they're exclusive features, I guess.
Yeah,
but
it is a weird visual, though. Like, you as a trainer, if this anything was remotely like this in real life, like, you wouldn't do that, right? You would just keep it there. But I don't know. That's just me.
I just want to add on to that a little bit. Biggest issue I see with that is if you do try and swap out your Pokemon, chances are you are swapping out because you're in a bad matchup and you want to get out of it. If you swap out and then bring in that same Pokemon again, not only are you losing that matchup, but now you switch locked yourself for a minute or a little bit under a minute in that bad position, so now you can't really swap out anything. It may, I guess, accelerate the sacrificial swap that Blandin brought to everyone's Twilight or Tempest. But aside from that, I think it's going to do more harm than good. Especially because you could lock yourself into the same Pokemon, and now you have 3 options instead of 2. So, more chance for error.
One comment on Twitch chat was that most casuals don't even switch anyway, so this is going to have 0 impact on their gameplay.
Could I say
And
something?
that's kind of true. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it's Blandon. So, I think there is something you can do with that swap. Like, I was just thinking about it. Like, let's say you're in a matchup, and maybe both of you are on a very little energy, and you know, like, your opponent is like gonna farm you out, and maybe, you know, because they're on such a low health and they're just trying to farm you out, and then you press the switch button. Now they're like, okay, they might just switch in, and you know you're trying to get your last charge move out. Maybe it'll confuse them, and they're like, okay, like, I'm gonna die straight away, so I have to get my charge move anyway. And then they spam it back onto the Pokemon that we're gonna farm anyway. So maybe you could trick your opponent like that. Maybe there's some strategies there.
Blandon, that's the exact scenario that happened to me when I got blown out by that bait and switch.
Could you also, if somebody attempts that against you, so you're both getting low and you're both like, you know, tension is rising, right? And then somebody swaps, can't you also just spam your swap, like, if it's available? Because, like, I can just pause the game. Like, if you try and dupe me, I'll just pause the game and try and figure out what you did. Like, okay, hold on, what'd you switch to? Okay.
Absolutely.
Right,
I mean,
Yes.
moving forward, if your opponent like makes a switch, you should anticipate a counter to come in. So if your opponent starts a switch, I would also be mashing the switch button as well, just to be ready for whatever comes in to counter whatever you already have out there.
I mean, if you switch in the same dude, like if your opponent switches in the same one as before, then, and you're spamming the switch, okay, you could do that too. You could just stay in there, right? You're like, okay, my Graveler's against the Victory Bell. This seems bad. Or they switch out Graveler into Graveler, and then you're like, switch out Victory Bell. Oh, into Victory Bell. Cool. I'm killing this Graveler then.
Yeah, fair call. Just
You're both
just
switch
can't outplay Valor Ashe. Just can't outplay him.
Just can't. It's impossible. Even in scrims, I've heard he's never lost a single match.
Yo, hush.
No,
Can I bring up one other positive, I think, with this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it is actually about the switch timer. So what's interesting is before, when you pulled up the switch window, unfortunately we don't have that ability to do that anymore. You can't really see like what Pokemon you have. They haven't like changed the UX to like show that anywhere on the screen permanently. But if before you can pull up that window whenever you want, just throw some fast moves, like that was pretty common. But now, as soon as you hit the button, your switch goes on, your switch clock starts counting down, and you have 12 seconds to select. So then if the opponent spams switch and they switch in, there's at least a 12-second difference. I remember a lot of times before when you switch out, they would just anticipate the switch. I think it's like 5 turns or so before you can see what the next Pokemon is. Like before the camera like allows you to see who they threw out, and then they switch. So they're like 5 turns behind you. They're like 2 seconds behind you. And so then at the end, when the switch timers came up and you were like, okay, I'm getting out of this bad matchup, I'm gonna counter this guy. You swap in, they just swap in too. So you may actually have like 10 or so seconds of like prime time, you know, Razor Leaf in or something against an Azumarill before they can like get out of there. So that is notably different. It could see an increase in fast moves as a result of that strategy, because it will come up. You even get more time if your opponent also takes a long time to do it. You can get like 24 seconds different. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's
There's
very
some-
off kilter.
There's some parts of this feature because about 30 minutes ago, Niantic support did tweet out, trainers, we are looking into the lag and freezing issues related to the recent trainer battle update, and we'll keep you updated as information becomes available. We appreciate your so it's, you know, feedback and patience. So, you know, it's a little bit vague, but, you know, they are addressing the fact that there's some glitches associated with it. I think the main mechanics are there to stay as far as, you know, as far as we know. And that's our big gripe with it, because we don't know exactly what strategy is going to emerge from it. But before, there was a definite strategy that worked very well in real time. What other positive aspects are there to potentially changing the system that we had to something like this?
Mind if I add my 2 cents?
Yeah, please.
Alrighty. So Kakuna Matata here. I think Niantic probably approached this from 2 different angles, some of which we've already talked about. So one was they have this new feature coming up, Team Rocket battles. We don't know what that's going to look like for sure. It might be PvP, it might not be. I'm thinking it'll probably be PvP. And if that's the case, that's going to bring in a much wider audience, because most people don't really interact with the PvP system on a day-to-day basis. So I think part of it's that. And another thing is the old Switch system had quite a few glitches associated with it, right? And I think they wanted to find a way around those, but in doing so, they accidentally created quite a few more problems. So I think the intentions behind it were along those lines, but the implementation could definitely use a bit more polish. I think we'd agree.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of questions on Twitch, a few subscribers, we always appreciate that, but a lot of questions on Twitch are asking about the debuff leaving now after a switch. I promise you we'll cover that. We're just focusing specifically on the switch mechanics, and we'll cover the debuff issue later on the stream. Unless there's any other positive. Yeah, please, go ahead.
So it's more of a transition. Honestly, the most positive thing about this is that it created discussion. I mean, we're here, we're talking. Niantic seems to be listening to something, at least, right? They're at least like, hey, let's get in there and fix some of these issues. And who knows, maybe they're listening to us as well. Honestly, I've had more ideas about how to change switching to be really cool, and I think a lot of people in chat are going to throw out some really cool ideas as well, maybe later if we open that up. But
Yes.
who was thinking about that before? We were just complacent. I mean, we were just playing the game. It was fun. We had thoughts, we had ideas, but it wasn't ever something like in the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
that's really cool.
I think that actually some people were looking at this. I know as a Ghost Stadium tournament manager myself, sometimes we have to resolve disputes with the Switch menu coming up and creating some issues in gameplay. We there's always been some animosity towards that specific feature and the way it was introduced. But you're right, it does sort of encourage change. We just hope that change doesn't end up in a place that was worse than what we had before. Matt Sarr on Twitch is saying that he thinks that the former way of switching was better for casuals, I suppose in the sense that it was perhaps a little bit less complicated. It was pretty instant. You knew exactly what was happening, and now it's a bit confusing. What's going on, like during that pause, and all of that. So, we've talked a little bit about the positives, and we've deconstructed some of those. I'll frame it in this way. I think something that is easier is not necessarily more fun. I'll ask Caleb this question. You're a pretty competitive player in the Atlanta area. Would you think it is worth sacrificing competitive gameplay to draw a bigger crowd in an effort to just get more and more people, just get volume and sacrifice those competitive gameplay?
I think the interesting thing about this conversation is I haven't really heard a lot of strong opinions on those that really favor the Switch. And obviously part of that is because I think most of us surround ourselves with very competitive players that like the old mechanics. Favor of bringing more people into the scene, and if that was Niantic's goal of making this changing up the Switch thing, I think it's a good effort in that sense. I just don't think that this is helpful in that sense, just because I think from a even newer player perspective, that Switch timer is much longer and it's just kind of clunky at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to hear from anyone that feels strongly in favor of the Switch in terms of how it impacts their play and why they like it more, even whether experienced or newer players. I think that reducing the complexity of games probably turns more people away. That's just my guess, and I think a good analogy for anyone that has ever others and the second game that came out, which was Melee, was very complex and had a lot of intricacies in the game that the creators didn't anticipate. And then for their third game, they just pretty much made it a lot simpler. And on a competitive level, like no one even played that third game. And I think on a commercial level, it just didn't do as well either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for casual players and for competitive players, just because the game was slower, right? And I think that's an interesting analogy here, because the new Switch mechanics makes the gameplay slower, right? It's just much fun just because it just takes longer. And so, so I think that's my thoughts on that. I think there may be other ways to bring new players into the system, whether it's adding rewards or changing some of the other mechanics on, like, not being punished as much on a bad lead. But I think this method, it's really going to bring more players in or not, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Caleb. I think that just that's the bottom line. You want to make features that will include a lot of people, but you don't want to sacrifice too much of that complexity. And you heard Hugs talking earlier about he's already delving into the mechanics, and so is King on his stream, and everybody's is right now seeing ways that they can perhaps exploit is not the right word, but use use the mechanics to their advantage and master them. Right? So Matt Swar has joined the voice call. You had some pretty good comments on Twitch. He's one of the North American champions, or finalists rather. Matt Swar, is your mic working okay?
He's not on yet, AJ, but we're going to get him
Oh,
on
he's not
shortly.
on? So I jumped the gun on that, but he'll be on shortly. I'll ask Mason this. You mentioned PvP favoring rock, paper, scissors, and this change potentially doing even more of that. With Pokemon Masters coming out within soon, I guess. I don't know if it's in the next few months or the next year or so, but it seems like the focus of that game is to be, really kind of sort of competitive and PvP oriented. Would a change like this make you migrate more to a game like that?
Any game in which they remove like the skill cap or lower the skill ceiling is always something that would potentially make me rethink my amount of like dedication to a game. Or if my competitive needs aren't being met, then I would go try my hand at something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that Pokemon Go's PvP is unique, and the fact that like the mainstream games, they're slow, methodical, well thought out. You have plenty of time to make your decisions, but that's not what Pokemon Go is about. Pokemon Go is, Pokemon Go. Fast battles, fast moving, fast switching, counting moves. It's very intense and short periods of time, whereas like mainstream games and other Pokemon games have that like slower strategical feel, and that's not what I play Pokemon Go for.
Man, I completely agree. Like the slow games are out there. They already exist. So like we don't want Pokemon Go to just become that again. But it's not, right? And it's drastic to say that it is. But
right,
if it leans in that direction, like I think like just to throw this out there, you could have the Switch was kind of frustrating before, like when it didn't work, but it didn't have to be. It could have like went into a queue, like a lot of fighting games. They have buffering, and so you press a move before it's ready, and then as soon as the thing can happen, it happens. So, well, I mean, a lot of people thought that's how switching worked. They're like, I'm just going to go ahead and switch during my confusion, and at the end of the confusion, it's going to switch, right? And then it didn't. But if that happened, there probably wouldn't be a lot of frustration. It would do the thing you wanted. So, like, there are ways to reduce frustration without altering core strategic facets of the game, and I think bridging that gap is really important, and like helping finding solutions, right, as opposed to I think deconstructing the pros and cons is good, but getting some good solutions will be awesome. We'll
definitely get suggestions out of this. That's actually going to be one of the next questions. But so I jumped the gun earlier on Matt Swar. I believe you're now in the channel. Could you say something? Make sure your mic's working okay.
Yeah. Hello? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we
I
got
hear you, Matt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No one responded, that's why.
I was saying your comment earlier about the previous mechanic being more casual friendly. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that?
All right. So the way the switch mechanic was, so whenever you were able to press on the switch button, it didn't automatically stop the battle. So you were still out there battling, but you can always just look at the back, what you had in the back at all times. And that was very helpful because sometimes in the middle of a battle, you forget what you have. Sometimes some of us are either rushing to get a team, or some of us have set a team. We've already set up like multiple teams. Like I see King on his live stream, he has 3 or 4 teams that he picks at random at some point. And so sometimes you just cannot remember every single Pokemon you have. So for a casual player, you're playing, right? You're tapping. You bring up the Switch menu because you're like, I don't remember what Pokemon I have. So you bring up the Switch menu, and you're still able to tap and battle and all the other stuff while you're looking at the 2 other Pokemon that you have in the back. And then you're able to like be like, oh, this one is better here in this scenario, or this one is better. and or I just stay with my Pokemon and I just press down, I exit out of the Switch menu. So it's just so much faster, and it's just so much better with that. Although I've had gripes with, I've said it earlier in the chat, I've hated the way the Switch is since day one.
Yeah, it is clunky, and people have had problems with it for sure. That's an interesting point. That strategy of forgetting your mon, is that what drove you to success all the way up to champions?
Oh, what do you mean?
I'm just kidding, man. I'm giving you a hard time.
No, I mean
Some
like
troll for sure.
no, it's just I've been playing like the competitive main series game since like X and Y dropped out. So about like 2 years after that. So like since 2015, and switching is such a fundamental game, such a fundamental aspect of that. Like like earlier today, I was watching some people playing competitively, and they were switching every other turn. And they were switching not just to waste time, but they're like, I need to have a competitive edge, or I'm predicting my opponent to have this Pokemon. So they were constantly switching. Every now and then you see a hit, and when it did hit, it was an important hit. So like every single time a Pokemon used a move, it mattered. It counted. Even if it was not very effective, it was that little bit of damage that you needed. So in the long run, you win. So I think that like having the switch time, and I remember when Niantic was saying about this whole entire PvP thing, it's to make things fast. The whole entire point is people are not going to be, they weren't thinking like we were going to make, like they weren't thinking Silph Road was going to make this, or that people were going to pick this up and be so hardcore. I mean, of course, everyone is going to do that but they were thinking, hey, they were thinking just like how they did in Go Fest, if anyone that went to Go Fest. You're going to go in there, and you're going to take, at most, 10 minutes. 10 minutes to battle, do what you need to do, make your team, that's it. Move on. That was the whole entire point of PvP, is 10 minutes to do a whole entire mini turn. Not a whole entire hour. And so this new switch mechanic not only makes the game clunkier, it makes it last longer. And if their intent was to make PvP much more casual and faster, the timer should have been from 30 seconds from the beginning. A 30-second timer, you'll see these games go on not only much more faster, but you'll see even better play. Like what we saw in the European Championship, that third shield with Altaria, you would see that every single play, and you would see even better plays. You'll just see people not sacking mons, but you'll just see them switching, and just every single time you did that one Razor Leaf mattered. Because even though you may have like disadvantage, it didn't matter, because you're switching, but you're doing that little bit of chip damage that they need, and it keeps the game moving on. And I feel like that is going to be so much more important than having this 1 minute timer, or this pausing for 12 seconds and then switching right back. And it's just a mess.
Yeah, I think a lot of these conversations are pointing at a very particular suggestion that I'm thinking about, but I'm gonna save that, well, for this next segue. It's just suggestions, right? I think a lot of people have come up with like different designs and such for the Switch system and what it should look like, and I can speak on behalf of Ghost Stadium when I think, like when Niantic rolled out PvP, there was a demand for being able to scrim with a lot of people and practice your strategies, and then also do tournaments remotely if you're in a rural area or you just want to get more practice in wherever. So we're doers, right? We don't just sit around and wait for solutions to happen. Niantic might roll out a matchmaking system, but in the meantime, we'll make one ourselves, and that's what Ghost Stadium really started as. So we, as a group, should definitely propose some suggestions. This is not my suggestion. Quartz, if you could pull up the image from a fellow Redditor that had a design for what a switch mechanic should look like. And it's the idea of being able to switch by simply tapping on a Pokemon bubble on the side. So for example, if you brought in Altaria, Azumarill, so up on the top, you would simply have the little bubbles of Toxicroak and Venomoth, and you could just tap them. There would be no switch menu. So you would never have to pop anything up, and that would still be, quite fast to be able to use. Again, this is not
Oh
my
my God.
design, but that would be a potentially interesting feature. I'm sure the collective of us could roast aspects of this, though.
Oh, I
It sounds
actually love
pretty
it.
amazing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it
Sorry.
sounds amazing. I think most of us are just gonna be like, yeah, that sounds dope. I mean, it fixes several. If we look at our pros and cons, I mean, one of the pros of the old system was like, I could pull up my box in case I forgot who I had. Well, if they're on screen the whole time, okay, there they are. And then if you're having trouble getting the Switch menu open or whatever, well, now it's available all the time, and then you could just reach up with your thumb and smack it whenever you need to.
Yeah,
Sounds
and you
really
could
cool.
Still... Yeah, and like how they have with the Switch menu, the whole entire little loading screen, you could still do that. You could still have the what I'm going to say 30 seconds, because that is what it should be, 30 seconds. You could still have the timer up there, like they have the whiteout, and then you could see the time moving, so like that you could just switch out faster.
Yeah. True.
I don't know if anyone here has played on the simulator Pokemon Showdown. I'm not sure.
No, but
maybe
I know what it is. It's basically being able to simulate full matchups of 6 with the stats and everything for the main series games. Is that about right?
Yeah. So it's an online battle simulator, and they have all the Pokemon that you have. They all have it laid down there with their stats and everything. I mean, I think that's like a little too much for this, but I mean, like having just the individual sprites of the Pokemon as you're battling, so you will have like the top part would be like your 4 moves, and then underneath those 4 moves, you see the Pokemon at all times. So you're like that, who to switch into when to click, and it's very similar to that design that I just.
Yeah.
I love it even
Pokemon always
because
there.
I mean, why is it that for literally forever we've just tolerated the fact that the Switch window can it just comes over your charge move? Like, why is that ever a thing? Like there's a lot of screen real estate on smartphones now. They're pretty big. So I mean, there are ways to move things around elegantly and use up some of the sides for your UX design. So
So I am getting the name of the person who designed it, and I do want to give credit where credit's due. Budos, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's Bhutos on YouTube is commenting, and it looks like he's the person who designed it. Thank you for coming up with this. This is really awesome. I think the fact that none of us here are really roasting it, except for one comment on Twitch from Tambio, saying maybe you don't want to bring one of the Switch Mon so close to the exit battle button, just as constructive feedback. But, at the same time, it would be pretty cool if the Switch feature was shown like that.
I think you can. I think what you could do is you can move the 2 Pokemon, closer to the bottom of the screen, and then have the charge moves a little bit more next to your Pokemon, because either way, the HP bar and stuff like that, if you notice, like whenever you're battling, you either focus on the charge move, and you don't really focus on the HP of your opponent and yours, or you focus on the HP of both yours and your opponent, and you don't focus on the charge move. So I feel like if you move that closer to the HP bar, you'll notice not only your HP, but you also notice the HP of your opponent, your charge moves, and then you'll be able to, so like right next to the Azumarill, you can have like the 2 charge moves like right there, right next to the Azumarill where there's all that free space, and move those 2 things where the charge moves used to be. And I feel like that will be better.
Yeah.
I was gonna add that so Fleck mentioned that Switch actions aren't buffered or queued right now, and
could you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, so when you select a switch action, if you're in the middle of an attack or you aren't able to do it for whatever reason, the action just doesn't happen. And if it were buffered or queued or somehow saved for a later time when you could do it, then the game would know, hey, this person is trying to do a switch. Let's hold on to that and do it at the first available moment. And I think tying into that visually, like there's really no feedback for when a switch does or doesn't work. So the what we called the switch glitch is actually still a thing. You just don't see a drawer falling down. You still fail to switch when you're in the middle of an attack. So some kind of feedback, like when you tap to switch, having it highlight or light up to say, "Hey, we know you want to switch." That would be cool too, and then actually do the switch.
Yeah, or with the other design, you know, with the two little icons like hanging out on your screen at all times, they're on your screen at all times. That was the problem with the aforementioned switch glitch, was that the drawer opened, you selected switch, the drawer closed, everything in your mind told you, oh, I didn't see it switch yet, it must just be waiting for later. No, it's not waiting for later. It's never going to happen. You need to try again. And so if trying again is also easier, if you have an icon permanently available and you're just pressing Toxicroak, slap, 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 you're just tapping on Toxicroak until it gives you Toxicroak. Okay, cool.
It's easy. It's for sure easy.
It like streamlines and really, and I think it's, I've thought of a few ideas and like looked around and stuff, and I think by far that seems like one of the most elegant ways to do it, and some variation of that, just showing the Pokemon at all times seems.
Had you seen this particular? Had you seen this example before?
I haven't. I just imagined it because I saw someone mention a comment like, you could just put the two guys on screen at all times. I'm like, yeah, you could do that. Like, and then it would just. And then from there, you can still change like how much of a pause time there is or not or whatever. But so a lot of what's happening is the old system and the new system, there were issues and, you know, like pros and cons with each. But the bottom line is that some of those things aren't exclusive. Like it's just pure profit. Like it's like a no-brainer. Like let's just do this and have it be done. And then the things that we do change aren't quality of life reduction. It's just you know, we can augment in this way or shift in this way, and it doesn't go up or down in value.
Right.
Great design.
On Twitch,
cool.
Yeah, it's a great design, but we are getting some comments on Twitch questioning whether are they even going to listen to this stream? Is any of this even worth it? You know, we just kind of have to deal with the cards we're dealt with. You know, I'll remind you, in the first year of this game, the community outreach was basically zero. And now we're at a point where Niantic has discussions with Sylph. You know, they talk to content creators. They invite them out to GoFest. So they do have intent, at least, to listen to the community. And, you know, if this stream gets big enough, if our words, you know, reach them, I have no reason to think that they're just going to straight up dismiss it. They might, but, you know, at least we try. So I don't know. In my view, this is a worthwhile effort at the very least.
I agree with that, and I think something else to consider. Someone mentioned earlier about Pokemon Masters, the upcoming PvP game, and I just looked up. It's set to release in sometime in summer 2019, so pretty soon, maybe even fall at the latest. But I'm sure that Niantic is probably thinking about that as a competition for pulling some of their players away. I agree with AG. I'm thinking that, you know, even more precedent for them to really listen to the community, because they probably want to keep as many players as they can, even if it's just PvP players interested in their game. And, you know, I hope they do too, just because I enjoy the game. But I'm sure a lot of competitive PvP players are really going to consider it. And something else to think about is also season 1 is about to end in August as well, right? And so this is kind of like a prime time for Pokemon Masters to really take away a lot of the competitive PvP players to their game. And so I think even more pressure for Niantic to really the community, or at least listen to the PvP community, if they want to keep some of their players. And I'm sure out of all the smart people that work there, I'm sure someone's probably thought about this as even just from a marketing side and development side as a potential threat to their success.
I think Niantic has always been listening. It's just the thing is, Niantic and their partnership with the Pokemon Company is very kind of like one-sided in a way, because the Pokemon Company tells Niantic basically what to do and when to do it. So they're like, hey, Niantic, we want you guys to release this Pokemon in 2 weeks. And Niantic is like, we don't really have it ready. We want to do something else. Pokemon Company's like, no, you're doing this in 2 weeks, and you need to do it like in 2 weeks. And if you don't, then something will happen. Like, oh, we'll start. I don't know. I don't really know exactly what they could do, but I'm pretty sure they would do something like, oh, you don't do that, then that's violation of our contract, so on and so forth. So, like, some of the things that they do have that is theirs, like the PvP that they're fixing and they're doing is more on their side than it is on the Pokemon Company side. So because of that, they're able to play around with it a lot more. Because like if the Pokemon Company was the one doing this, they wouldn't allow such a buggy system to come out. And I'm not saying it's a bad system at all. I'm not saying PvP is bad. I mean, hey, we all love PvP here. We all made it like such a better hobby, such a bigger hobby. But I mean, like, this entire trial and error is what I like. And so I don't know. I just feel like Niantic has always been listening to me, but they've been kind of like a little strong-armed earlier in when Pokemon Go was in its infancy to do what they can do. Now that they've been able to get a little bit more freedom, because Pokemon Go is such a massive massive entity, and it makes so much money for Pokemon that the Pokemon Company has been able to be more lax about it, which is why I feel like Niantic was finally able to be like, okay guys, let's push out PvP, and even though there's a lot of things that we still need to fix, let's push it out, because people have been saying this and people want this, and we think it's good enough right now. So I think that's why they've been able to finally do this. And yeah, I read about that a while ago, that Pokemon Company has a lot more power in what Niantic does, which is why we didn't see Gen 4 like Garchomp. Like when they released the screenshots for PvP, they released like Heatran and Garchomp and all that, but they didn't really release them all the way until like 5-6 months after PvP was shown. And that's Pokemon Company saying, we don't want this Pokemon to be released yet, we want it to be released.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's frustrating from their point of view, and I don't know if this mechanic specifically was something that came down from the top. I'm a little skeptical of that, but it's possible. There's a theory that floated around that because Pokemon Masters is coming out, that potentially you want to make this much more casual. And if that's the case, then we just have misaligned goals, and these efforts, they're kind of for nothing. But I don't know. I think why bother even introducing this feature if you don't want any kind of competitive gameplay?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, just for the record, I really think we should just acknowledge how unique Pokemon Go is for PvP. I mean, really, like. It kind of has, like, you brought up the Smash Brothers example from before, and Smash Brothers is a weird fighting game. There's not really one like it. There's also not really a game like Pokemon Go PvP. I mean, it has its own niche, and I don't know if that was on purpose or a happy accident or what, but like, I'd say capitalize on that. I mean, you could see what happened to look at MOBAs. Look at League of Legends, right? They jumped in and scooped up everybody, and then like what 10, 20, 30? How many MOBAs have came out since then that nobody really plays? It's because League got them first. Like I think the point about the competition is like right on the money. If there's a game coming out soon that can scoop up all of your PvPers because they haven't like really cemented themselves into your game, then you could cement them in advance. You know, if you play your cards right. So and if they have more creative control over this process because it's not as controlled as from the Pokemon Company side, then that's just another boon really that they have going for them. So I think all the momentum, like the ball is kind of in Niantic's court, it sounds like, and they can they can choose however they want to do it, really, right? Like we don't know, like you said, we don't know what their goals are, but they have.
I mean,
this is a critical moment, I think, for them, like to kind of choose how they want to play it.
Really,
I don't think.
I think so.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think Masters is gonna pull like if you like. From what I've seen on Masters so far, which has just been that one trailer, it's not as real time as Pokemon Go is in the PvP. So I don't really think it's gonna take as many people from the Go community. I think what's gonna do is it's new toy effect, new toy syndrome, which is everyone wants to play it, and especially if you're like if you played almost all the Pokemon games or like have nostalgia for the old Pokemon games like I do, you're going to be playing that a lot more than Go. But for PvP, I don't think so. I think like in terms of real-time PvP for Pokemon, I think Go is still going to be on top because Master still seems more turn-based than Go, even though technically Go is also turn-based, but it feels a lot less turn-based.
Yeah, I mean, it's the turn-based technicality. It's really not. I mean, it's just so. Go is very, very fitting name for this game, and the demographics of people that play this game is just all over the place. I mean, I'd be in a car with an old lady, a couple teenagers, middle-aged guy, and then me, and then we're all talking about the same thing, just raiding. So you just don't know what you're gonna get with this game. B-Gold, I think you had a question for the group, right?
Yeah, I did. So my big question is with the announcement of Pokemon Masters and this new change to PvP, as well as the introduction of that whole Team Rocket quest and Armored Mewtwo and all that was found in the data dump a couple of weeks back. Do you think that this change is Niantic trying to pull in the greater community outside of the hardcore PvP players because they're planning some sort of PvP-based either event or special research or something pertaining to the Team Rocket, and they want to get as many people into PvP prior to dropping it? So that's why they made these changes a bit more user-friendly.
I don't think it's at least for me, maybe because I mean, I could be a little biased coming from a much more competitive side from this, like a bit more of like the higher level, but I honestly don't feel this is more intuitive. I feel like this is a lot worse, even for the casual, because I've had like, first of all, the casuals that, at least in my community, the casuals, they don't care about PvP. They still don't care. They'll do PvP just because either a quest tells them to do it, or because they're just going to mess around with like silly mons. So I think at the end of the day, this is just worse, because even the casual people, I feel like, are just gonna open the menu and be like, oh, what's going on? I have 12 seconds. And I feel like that's a lot more pressure on the casual, because now you see a timer counting down, and you have 12 seconds to decide: are you going to switch? Are you not going to switch? Oh, here's all three of your Pokemon. I'm sorry if you were tapping a lot and you press the switch menu. Oh, look at that! You accidentally switched into a Pokemon you didn't want to in the first place. I don't know.
That's a good point. It does punish you for accidentally tapping a little
bit.
Yeah.
I think something to add on to what Matt said also is, going to want to do PvP, and I think Niantic really wants to incentivize this. So they have quests for it, and different tasks or even community days for like Mammoth Swine. You could get Sinnoh Stones if you do it, but the people that don't want to do PvP just do it for the rewards, right? They just lose some matches really quickly or win some matches really quickly with a friend, throwing intense CP Pokemon. And so I think this really comes down to, I think, them wanting to bring more people in, but it's really only impacting the people that really enjoy the concept, like the aspect of the game, the PvP aspect of the game, and not really impacting the casual players as much as they probably think or want to or think they are going to. Just because I'm thinking right now, none of my local friends that play Pokemon Go that don't PvP, they don't even know about these changes, or like they couldn't care less.
Right.
If they went and did a battle with a friend, they probably wouldn't even realize there was a difference, right, in the mechanics. And so this is why I think, if we are able to get into Niantic's ear or build some partnership, I think that's hopefully a takeaway they can see, just because the good thing about this game is there's so many things for it. And so I know some friends that just like to collect shinies, or they just like to raid, but they don't like to PvP, right? And so in some ways, this change is alienating one group of your players without really bringing in a lot more from the other aspects.
Was
when Matt mentioned
this confirmed? Sorry.
What? Say that again?
Was this confirmed to be for casual people? Like this whole entire change was for casuals?
Or we are
we're
speculating. We are speculating here. Yeah, we don't have a line into what Niantic, the inner workings of Niantic. They're very protective about, how they make their decisions, and at best they're vague with their sort of answers. So no, we are speculating, and it's reasonable to think that they just want to add more players into the.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, to go to the article that they posted, their exact statement was, in a continued effort to make trainer battles a fun and competitive experience, switching Pokemon will now briefly pause the battle. This will grant you more time to choose which Pokemon to call out, and it will avoid Pokemon causing damage to each other while they're withdrawn into their Pokeballs. So based on that statement, I think they were really focused on, like, you have your switch window up, your opponent's attacking you, and like general frustration surrounding the previous switch mechanic. And that too probably ties in with wanting to attract more people and not wanting them to run up against this frustrating switch feature.
Right.
But we're kind of in version 2 of a frustrating switch feature.
I think I think I'm kind of with Kakuna on that, where like, so as far as pausing the game goes, I feel like it would be more accessible to new players and it would be less punishment. Now, yeah, sure, there's a timer that's counting down, but there's also a timer when you die. Like when one of your Pokemon faints, then you have like 15. Like the timer's still there. Like you can't really get away from the timer anxiety. So as far as that goes, I don't know. I honestly have to like say that if you're going after a casual player base, I think this is a step in that direction. Like assuming that let's say the rest of the things weren't really changed or modified, or there was some, nice quality life UI changes. At the end of the day, if they put a pause into the game, that gives players more time to make decisions, and it gives them an opportunity to not get punished from a fast switch. Like, let's say it's Venomoth versus Toxicroak, and you don't know what resists confusion, but you're dying, and you're dying fast, and you need to just press button. Well, if you hit the switch button, you can pause, and you can wait, and you can say, okay, Psychic, it's what, poison, and I don't know, some other type, I don't know, it's flying maybe? Oh no, you're wrong, it's poison bug, but it's flying, so who knows, right? You guess, and you throw something in there, you throw an electric Pokemon, and it's like, it's doing better than Toxicroak. Okay, cool, right? So like, there is some credence to that, and I think there's no way a casual player doesn't benefit more from that. Like, it reduces the delta or the disparity of difference between someone that's very good and very bad. Because if you're not very good and you're trying to switch out, and as soon as you switch, the really good player just switches instantly to the correct guy. I mean, that's hard, you know? That's hard to do. Like, it's hard to like deal with that, to know that like they're gonna switch instantly and you're not, and that's just another way that someone is, you know, gaining an advantage on you. So, on the one hand, I could see it as being unfair, and on the other hand, I could see it as being like, it's what competitive games do sometimes. I mean, that's why I think previously we'd said something about a matchmaking feature, but like, dang, I mean, then you just match up against people that are at your skill level. Then you just put all the skill capped you want into the game. Just as many things that take skill as you want. Who cares? Because the good ones rise to the top, the middle ones stay at the middle, bad ones stay at the bottom. Everyone's, you know, fair fight. So, like, matchmaking works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
What I got out of it when I read it the first time was that I remember whenever you would switch out, when you switched out, your Pokemon was taking damage, and when you switch in, your Pokemon was taking damage. So if I had a Razor Leaf user, so like my Ludicolo, it was still doing damage to the Azumarill as it was being switched out, and then whatever was coming in, let's say Skarmory, because that would be like the Ludicolo counter, it would still be taking damage from Razor Leaf, and that wasn't fair, because yes, Razor Leaf was doing what, 2 damage to Skarmory, it didn't matter, but what if they switched into a Wish Cap or a Lantern? It would already be almost dead, and I still haven't even switched out my guy. So I feel like what they were trying to do was, when you switched out, pause it. Then when you're switching in, pause it, because like that, no one gets the advantage. I'm not getting energy, and I'm not getting damage. And while you're not getting energy, and you're not getting damage. So
Yeah,
I feel like
yeah,
the whole
let's
point was to
definitely
equalize it.
I think definitely 100% of the time when the camera's flipping and flying around and dudes are coming in and out of Pokeballs, just stop the attacks for a second. Like, let them chill. Let them get to like a resting state before, like, you know, you resume that. Like, even just a
Stop
second.
hurting
like,
my Pokemon.
It doesn't have to pause the game necessarily, but like let the animations play out, or you know, whatever. But yeah, that was really crazy.
And, yeah.
I did want to correct you though. As soon as you swap out on the old system, you don't take damage anymore. So like, what I could do,
okay.
so if you led Hypno versus Toxicroak, I throw a counter. It takes 1 second. Fusion takes 2. I can actually throw the counter and then switch, and then later I can pull out a completely fresh Toxicroak, having not taken any damage at all. Like he will literally be undamaged. The one that takes the confusion is the one you switched into, but it all depends on how quick you can do it. So. Yeah. If you switch slow, you're actually just getting hit. You're not getting hit on your way out. You're getting hit because you still haven't left. You haven't even done the command.
Well, sometimes it's lagging because since this is always server based, it's very little to do with client side. Since most of it is server based, even when you are switching out, like, you know, the switch glitch where everyone's like, oh man, I pressed the switch button like 13 times and I was pressing on the Pokemon to switch out. So yeah. It's true when you're actually switching. Yeah, when you're actually switching, it doesn't do damage. But when, you know, the server is saying, maybe I'll switch them out in about 2 turns. Whoops, 2 turns too late. Oh well, not my fault. It's your fault because
that's nothing to do with the server. I'll drop a little bit more mechanical knowledge for people. So moves have a duration, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns. It's just half a second in the game. When you get to the last and final turn, your move can do damage, your move can gain energy, and also you can queue a switch command. There is a queue, but it's only 0.5 seconds. So if you press confusion and then switch, it won't work. If you press confusion and wait 1.5 seconds and then switch, it will actually switch you after 2 seconds. It'll switch you. So the people that kept trying are people that didn't stop doing fast. Or there were people that didn't know they needed to just wait a little bit longer for that animation to get, you know, close to the end. But it's a skillful thing. It's hard. Like, I guarantee you, I've taught a bunch of people at my local tournaments, hey, here's how to switch. Here's how to do it. You just have to wait till right at the end of the move, and it works every time.
That's a good point. You know, when we talk about casuals, we do. I know a lot of us here, especially in Ghost Stadium and just like the content creators. One of the main reasons to pump out all this content is to help casuals. So when we say casuals, we're not saying it from like elitist point of view, like, you know, they're always gonna suck or whatever. Like, I've had sessions in my local community, at least one session in my local community where, you know, I've been able to tell them about shield baiting, you know, like, you know, what that even means as a concept, and then now they're able to use it. So, you know, this kind of stuff, when we talk about these mechanics, it's not like it's impossible for casuals to learn quick switches if they have someone to teach it to them. And we did have a comment from Twitch saying, from Math Nerd Gord, these battles they're fast paced and real time, so we shouldn't expect to wait your turn. I thought that was a pretty good quote.
I
To,
mean, even
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, even pros sometimes need the content just because, like for me, I went to top 4 in the American Championships. Not once did I know about piggybacking. I've never read that. I never found that. I'm pretty sure there was like 100 articles about it. I never read it until I tuned into the European live stream, and Zionic and King were both talking about piggybacking, and I'm like, what is piggybacking? Then I learned about it. I'm like, I never knew about this. And again, I'm like what people would say, an expert or a high level player. Yeah, I still didn't know about that one mechanic. Now that I know about it, now I'm gonna try to use it more properly. But hey, just because I went to the top doesn't mean I know everything. Just because I'm an expert to most people doesn't mean I know anything. You can always learn. You can always improve. And just because don't take casual as a negative term. If anything, it means that people aren't really expecting. Because trust me, I've lost to a couple of casual players in my community, and like it was an upset for like everyone was like, whoa, you lost to this person, you're not supposed to lose to that person. I'm like, well, you know, sometimes people misplay and I lost. And you know, again, just because you're casual doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you don't know exactly 100% of the mechanics. But again, even experts don't know. So I just want to let that out.
AJ, real quick, just to clarify, that comment by Math Nerd Gord was actually the original quote from the initial PvP announcement by Niantic. So it's interesting to see what they announced and then what we have now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh my god. What? Really?
Yeah.
Well, so again, for context, what was the quote that Niantic said before, and then what? And then we're juxtaposing that with what new?
So Niantic in their initial announcement, part of when talking about PvP when it rolled out, was that battles are fast-paced and real-time, so don't expect to wait your turn. That was in their announcement, and Math Nerd Gord, either through any of our social media platforms, said, highlighted this as juxtaposing the difference with what we're seeing right now with this cooldown period.
Wow. Dubious.
I just wanted to stress something that Flark said earlier, that all the wonkiness with the switching, it isn't lag or like server desync stuff. Stuff is happening due to for specific mechanical reasons, and in ways that are just really unintuitive to even advanced players. And I suppose the good news there is that since they're mechanical, the mechanics can hopefully be changed. But that's just something I wanted to stress.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's because there are rules behind, previously when your Switch wasn't working, there are rules and reasons for it, right? It wasn't random. It wasn't the server. You can't blame anything but lack of not diligence, but just having the just like being able to wait until that right moment and then throwing it out, just like being patient, is basically what it was all about. And to not nail that, there are good players that don't nail it. There are worse players that don't nail it. But either way, yeah, Kakuna's right. It wasn't intuitive, right? Like we've done extensive testing on our end to figure out the rules, right, of how it works. There's no in-game tutorial that says, oh, if you're trying to switch, make sure you wait until the very end of your move before you try it. Otherwise, it won't work. That's not in the... So if you make it intuitive, you don't need tutorials. Or if you make it tutorials, then you can keep it fairly... I don't know. I mean, I think that the Switch... Like, if you want to talk about, like, maybe what's a good mechanic, right? Because if switching is mechanical, if waiting till the end of your move and then switching, if that's like a mechanical skill, is that like a fun skill? Is that really cool that that you're better at switching than someone? Like, I don't know. It doesn't really feel good, right? But you know what does feel good? That clip they were just playing. When the dude switched right at the end, boom, tanked it with the Altaria and won the game. That feels good. Everyone went nuts. That
not
is
not just for the guy that won, but I'm sure that the guy that lost was like just appreciated the technique there. I mean, I don't think they felt silly necessarily for tapping Ice Punch when they did, because the other guy could have rolled a charge move at any given point. You know, at that point, if I lose to something like that, as opposed to getting stuck in a switch menu, I just, you know, that's GG, you know? Let's get some GGs in Twitch, for those of you who had the emotes, because, you know, I whenever I lose to some level of strategy like that, I just want to learn from that, you know?
Right. There's a difference with, like, fun mechanical skill and unfun mechanical skill. Like, another one is tapping. It sounds like they're going to change how charge moves are, so we'll wait and see how they do it. But right now, like, kids can't even play the game. Like, I go to tournaments and stuff, and they're, like, half tapping their move. Like, I don't even need a shield again. I'm like, okay, blast burn, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. It's not going to hit very hard, because they just can't hit the button like other people can. It's crazy to think that is a kind of a more of an ableism sort of thing, where it's like, oh, if I can't make my arm work, then I'm not going to be competitive. And it's like, that doesn't feel good. Or if I can't, like, perfectly nail the rhythm of, like, my fast moves when I'm trying to switch, that doesn't feel good. Having, like, a queue, or having it wait until the next available moment and then doing it, like, okay, cool, I didn't get punished by that, but there's still this cool instantaneous swap, you know, real-time swap or whatever. Maybe we can keep that. So things to keep in mind. What's actually fun when you can be better than someone at it, and what isn't. It's a good way to look at it.
I wanted to go back real quick to when they announced PvP. Now I remember why I was so, like, pissed and annoyed about that 1 minute switch time. Because the whole entire point of them saying it's a fast-paced game. Okay, you have a minute to switch though, so, you know, switch wisely. And it's like, well, what's the point of it being fast-paced? What? Okay, I'm here, sure, and I'm losing, or we both have, where, like, in Jungle Cup, you know, when there's a Vigoroth out there, you don't want to switch out, because if you switch, you're gonna lose. So, and then you have two Vigoroths, right? You want to save the Vigoroth for later, because you don't know what it's gonna do, but you can't switch, because the moment you switch, you have a minute, and you're trapped in for a minute. That doesn't seem fun. And I remember I was so, like, when that came out, and I was with a group of my PoGo friends, I was saying, this is such BS, and I was just, like, basically ranting about it, and no one really understood why I was ranting, and I was telling them about competitive play and all this other stuff, and they're just like, all right, Matt, you need to calm down. I don't know what you're saying. This 1 minute timer feels fine. I don't really care about it. And then as the month went, as PvP kept going, everyone was like, oh, you're right, that 1 minute switch timer really sucks. Or they're like, yeah, I can see that 1 minute timer should go down. And some of them have seen me play competitively, and they're like, oh, okay, I see why switch is so important. You're literally switching every other turn.
I actually think that like, this might fall under the suggestions category, but to have an incrementing switch timer, like adding, like say it starts at 30 seconds, so if I switch first, mine's 30, my cooldown's 30, and then if you switch, or basically the next person to switch, their cooldown will be like 35 or like 40, and then it starts to get kind of offset, and it starts to be like you're the earlier on, because if you switch first, it sucks, right? Like we all know that switching first generally sucks, but and often you lose because of it. But what if the timers were offset? I actually think this new switch mechanic, having played a couple of battles and realizing that you could sit around for 12 seconds, and then the opponent could sit around for 12 seconds, and you can have like a big amount of difference in this. You're kind of desynced as far as your switching goes, right? On that next switch you do, the opponent can't respond with another switch. They have to kind of hang out for a while or maybe die before being able to switch. So I like that what this change has done is it's showcasing what, and we'll feel this over time, of course, but it's showcasing just how impactful offsetting those switch timers can be, right? When your cooldown is different than your opponent.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
And I think
don't-
that by deliberately designing the timers to increment over time, then switching later, yes, is an advantage, but you're also switching with a higher cooldown, which is a disadvantage.
I don't know. I don't like that because
Hmm.
the whole entire point of the games is to switch, because that is like switching was so important in the actual Pokemon games. And I'm sorry if I keep going back to the actual Pokemon games, but the Pokemon Company has been doing this. Well, Game Freak with Pokemon Company have been doing battles since '96. At this point, they've almost perfected it, and they see that switching was so important and so monumental that they introduced things like spikes and stealth rocks. So spikes, whenever you switch out, if your Pokemon is grounded, you can set up to 3 layers of spikes. Every layer of spikes is 6.25 damage, or yeah, about 6.25. Eventually, if you get all 3 layers of spikes, you do 25% damage upon switching. And if stealth rocks, bases it off your weakness. So if you're weak to rock, you do 25. If you're not weak to rock, it does 6.25%. And they see that if you never introduce that mechanic into the game, oh my god, you will have a 200 turn game. And I'm not even exaggerating. 200 turn game. There was a game that I saw that it was from the very first Pokemon game, from Red, Blue, and Yellow. There was no spikes, no stealth rocks. That game was about 150 turns. And this was on Showdown, where you can fast forward and go a little bit faster in your turns. It was 150 turns. They were sitting there for 25 minutes. And all they were doing was switching out. They were switching in to get the upper hand. So I feel like switching is so important that Pokemon realized, like the Pokemon Company, Game Freak realized, oh, people are going to be switching out every time. Let's, let them still switch out as many times as possible, but let's also introduce some mechanics to kind of hinder it. But you can get rid of those items. You can still get rid of those hazards, and you can still be able to switch out, because at the end of the day, you need to switch. You cannot just stay there. And even though, yes, I'm scared of rocks, like I'm scared of stealth rocks because the Pokemon I have in the back are flying, is a flying type, I still need to switch because I need to have the advantage. Or because I know that if I switch out now, I do take the 25% from stealth rocks, but if I switch, I win the game. And that's the thing about switching.
Yeah.
It's
I think
just
I get
so
your point.
important.
I think
Yeah.
I get your point there, and what I would say is a takeaway is that there's a lot of wiggle room, I think, for Niantic in 2 different apertures. I think one of them is with shields, like taking 100% less damage or taking 75% less damage might be a cool thing they could like try out, or like release like a patch for, and like, oh, shields are different now. They could also do things like playing around with the switch timer, or adding potentially extremely complex, I don't know, that I play complex games. That was hard to follow, but I can tell that the people that play Pokemon competitively might understand all of those. It might be more elegant in a turn-based game, but in such a fast-paced game, like throwing out extra items and stuff sounds pretty hard. And so, but they could try it, right? They could mess around with making switching more active, and then having you make more decisions about switching. Should I switch? Should I not? How do I stop my opponent from switching? Those are good things to keep in mind. I mean, we're all here at the end of the day because they changed the switch system. We're not here talking about the cool new moves they added to the game, which, by the way, like, credit where credit's due. Yes, new moves are good, right? We're not saying that Niantic's not trying. They're definitely trying. They're doing really good things. There's just this changes a core facet of the game, which like is kind of a foundation. It's like you can only make 3 decisions in PvP. I'll go over them: fast move, charge move, switch. That's it. And then shielding when applicable. But like at the end of the day, you have like 3 actions you can take on your turn. That's it. That's all you have. If you make one of the actions less with less depth, I think that's the wrong direction. And I think to what Matt was saying, I think the original Pokemon games realized that switching there's a lot there that there's a lot of content you can scrape together and strategy and depth you can add into the game. And it doesn't necessarily have to negatively impact casual players. There's a lot of people that battle on Pokemon games casually.
I think the main thing that is an important takeaway for Niantic is not so much that they changed the switching, but more so that they changed it in a way that players aren't willing to adapt to it because it's changed the fun of the game, right? And so, like, if they change the battle system and it makes it a little more complex, or maybe not more complex, but comparable in a different way, you know, all the good players or people that are really interested in PvP are going to find ways to adapt to it and, you know, look into the new mechanics. And I think some people have been doing that for the past 24 hours or so, but at least amongst the competitive players is, yeah, there might be little nuances here or there in the new system, but it makes the game less fun, right? And I think that's what's driving people away rather than having people look into it and try to adapt to it, right? And I think that's even with any moves that are a little overpowered that they introduce, or mons that they introduce, like Power Punch, Medicham, they're, you know, the good players are going to try to figure out ways to play around it rather than say like it's just not fun anymore, right? And I think that's important takeaway is it's not as fun for a lot of people because of the change. Not so much that they made a change, but a change that makes it less fun.
I mean,
that's such a good point.
Yeah, like give the community like 4 days and we'll be discovering stuff about the switch mechanic that we didn't know about. But the whole entire point is that it's just right now it's just a laggy mess, and it's just bad. No matter how you swing at it, and I guess maybe I'm really biased to just the old switch mechanic, but it's just no matter how you swing at it, this is just, even if we can figure out how to favor it to our advantage, it's not good. It's just not a good GUI. It's not it's not a good interface. It's not a good timer. I don't know. I feel like no matter how you swing at it, it's negatively impacting.
But to summarize the suggestion specifically, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that maybe some kind of overlay with your mon on the screen, that would be the best compromise if you wanted to change it from the original. Is everybody in agreement there?
Yeah, 100% on that. That's awesome.
I think that it's sort of 2 things. I think on the one hand, we've been very critical about this, right? We've been critical in 2 areas. One is about how does it look, right? And the other one is how does it feel? I think that look is fine, right? It's weird, like the camera's like staring at people's arms and stuff. Like it's kind of strange. Like they could go change that. They could tweak how the camera works, right? They could fix some of these bugs that make it a little laggy or unresponsive. But at the end of the day, how does the pause feel, right? That's kind of like a big thing that we've been talking about. It's something that Mason brought up. We are all kind of like nodding in agreement about the pause being like so strange when the game's supposed to be fast-paced according to their marketing pitch. So that's I think the look. I think we're all in agreement that look is like super sexy, right? But then the feel maybe is like a step back. So
Mhm.
it's and it goes away from the core like crux of what the game's doing and what niche the market has. It's very unique, and to slow it down, I think just lumps it in with a lot of other turn-based games that are already available. There's not like a, it holds a bright candle in this niche right now.
So we'll take this suggestion as our suggestion for the group. We'll put a pin on it, and I'm gonna actually close out with what maybe us as a group we can incite the community to do. There were a few more topics that I did want to cover before we close out, because there were other factors that came in with the announcement. One of them that didn't come in the announcement was the fact that the buffs and debuffs, when you switch out, are now removed. So, when you're using Metachamp, for example, and you use a power-up punch, before, if your opponent switches out and then you counter switch out, then you wouldn't lose that buff from power-up punch, and the same goes for Victory Bell with Acid Spray. But now, something hidden about this new mechanic that actually this doesn't happen anymore. So if you switch out that Medicham and you bring it back in, it doesn't have that buff. We'll just do a quick few minutes on this before we move on, but I did want to make sure that we covered that in here. But what do you guys think? Was that a benefit or a detriment to the competitive scene?
I just want to quickly say that I think the entire buffs and debuffs staying upon switch was actually an error on Niantic's part when they first dropped those moves.
Yes.
And with that, they silently patched it in this update because they said when they first announced those new moves, they said more to come in future updates. And maybe they realized that the buffs and debuffs stayed within switches and changed the outcome of the game. So they wanted to balance it back around what they intended it to be instead.
I think 2 weeks
they
after
originally
the
announced
buffs,
it, right?
Yeah,
They
I think
they
2
announced
weeks.
that it was gonna get cleared or whatever on like one of their press releases. That like, oh yeah, those buffs won't persist when you switch, and then they always have.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks after the buff mechanic came out, and they saw that it kept staying, they were like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. We're gonna get rid of that next patch. And the next patch rolled around and they didn't get rid of it, and the next patch rolled around and they still didn't get rid of it. I was counting down the days. I'm like, at some point they're going to get rid of this because it's not supposed to be like this. It never was. Like in the actual game, it wasn't supposed to be like that. And here I'm assuming it's not supposed to be like that either. And when they announced that, I'm like, all right, yeah, it's not. I feel like,
well, is it a buff or is it a bug or a feature? I mean, like, do we see this as positive at this point? Do we think Acid Spray is more fun or less fun? Do we think Power Up Punch is more fun or less fun? Like these kinds of moves are staples now in PvP. A lot of the debuffs aren't being used really, but that's a different story as far as balance is concerned. The real question is it more interesting to have a Pokemon come out later that was hit with a buff or gave itself hit with a debuff, or if it gave itself a buff? Is that more compelling? Is it more
Mason,
strategic?
that
Is it what
question
we want?
specifically, Mason, what do you think? Power Up Punch, all the debuff moves, do you see them having more or less play in the meta? The debuff after Switch has been removed?
I see Acid Spray being less viable because all you have to do is switch out, and then you've effectively canceled, any debuff that they have on you. Whereas Power Up Punch, I still think is very viable because usually you don't switch Metacham out after you've gotten the ball rolling with him. You usually double shield Metacham, get the 4 Power Up Punches in, and then you just keep going until Metacham dies, even if it's halfway into the next Azumarill, as long as you win the lead type of thing. So I think that stat buff moves will still be very popular, whereas we might see a slight decline in debuffs, just because they're so easy to get rid of now.
I
think they need to rebalance. the game. They need to rebalance. Like acid spray is like not used right now. It was fringe usable. Now it's just not. Like I would, and I loved it.
Like if they're gonna keep this, which is the whole entire point was supposed to, lower the debuff energy cost. Like acid spray should not be what is it 50?
Yeah.
For it, yeah, acid spray should
Yeah.
never have been 50 to begin with. It should have been like 35. Like no, maybe not 35. Well, yeah, 35 or 45 or 40.
Mm.
But now that the whole entire debuff gets, washed away when you switch, put it at 35. If you're gonna stay in, then I'm going to acid spray you 2 times, and you're going to die. Or you switch out, give me switch priority, even if it isn't a favorable matchup, like Altaria versus Victory Bell. If I debuff you with, so right now, if I'm doing Razor Leaf to Altaria, I'll be doing, let's say, 1 damage per Razor Leaf. I debuff you. Now I'm doing 2 damage per Razor Leaf. I debuff you again. Now, well, no. If I debuff you once, I'll be doing 3 damage. If I debuff you again, I'll be doing 6 damage. I debuff you one more time, and basically it's as if you're a water type, and I'm going to melt you. So yes, your Altaria is supposed to have the lead advantage, but because I'm debuffing you, you need to switch out. Now you gave me switch priority.
So Mason, have you been able to test out this debuff feature at all?
No, I haven't played with the debuff since the new switch mechanics have dropped.
Who
I've
here
just
has
been
been
strictly
able
trying to
to
work out the jungle matchups.
Right. Who here has able to really tinker with this whole debuff buff thing? Because I have a question from our audience.
We were just
I
testing
was the
this
one
right
that made
before
the
stream.
Yeah,
Kakuna?
I made the Reddit post about it. I got a couple videos out on it. I don't know if I was the, but yeah, Kakuna asked me. He was like, "Do we know if that got fixed?" I was like, "That's a good question. I'm gonna go test that." Like, so I've messed with it in a testing scenario, but not as like a gameplay one.
So my specific question from the audience is, basically, if my Victory Bell faints just after using an acid spray, is the buff still in place? And if nobody knows that, then I'll just leave it open. And it is still in place.
Yeah. So so the buff is attributed to your Pokemon. The debuff is attributed to theirs. So if I acid spray and switch, right? If I'm on a lowland muck and I spit some goo at you and then I switch out, you're still in. Your Toxicroak or whatever is still gonna get melted by a confusion. Shout out to Nightmare Cup. But like, when the Toxicroak switches out, he's no longer acid at this point. So, and he already wants to switch out. So it makes it weird. Like there was a cool strat where you could like drop an acid spray and then swap into something and like almost melt the dude with like a confusion, and then Toxicroak will get out of there later. But I don't know if it matters now if he was acid sprayed before versus now. Is that a big difference when he comes back out? Only time will tell, but I do think they need to make acid spray cheaper so you can put it out more often, and then maybe just reduce how much it debuffs, like how strong. Because it's 2 stages right now, they could just make it 1. Stuff like that. And they're gonna need to rebalance all those.
In the actual game for acid spray, it does it's a base 40 damage. It's a base 40 special attack damaging move that does do -2 defense on this -2 special defense. So it does 40 the first turn, and then basically it essentially does 60 the next turn, then does I think like 90 afterwards, and then it keeps going. And then if I use a special move, any special move like Flamethrower, instead of being a base 90 attack, it's now like almost a 200 attack because you're at -4.
And so another feature that came in that was announced at least, but nothing was actually introduced, was some mention about swiping and tapping. Caleb, I know you've done you've competed with quite a wide range of players in your local community. Do you think maybe switching from the furiously tapping on the charge move to some kind of swiping and tapping feature, that this could be like a really welcome feature for the PvP scene?
You're talking about, yeah. I mean, I think honestly, I think there is more friendly for more casual players and newer players. Isn't I mean, unless it's a huge issue for the like furiously tapping versus swiping. I mean, I think fatigue wise, it just makes it easier for everyone. But thing would be the concept of using a charge move, because there's like a lot of over tapping versus under tapping, and like a lot of those very advanced mechanics that a lot of the newer players just don't understand, right? And so I think that might be a feature that balances the game more for newer players, that to understand why they may be losing. It's not because a new player that they lost because they went against under taps, right? Like that's such a complex concept that probably drives away players if they really knew that was what was going on. I think that would be much more welcoming for newer players. Obviously that reduces some complexity of the game, but I think at the same time easily digestible by the competitive community than the Switch.
To be honest, I had a lot of carpal tunnel with the immediate, when the PvP came out, and the way I was tapping was just not working, so I had to watch videos and ask people of like how they were doing it.
I mean, it's just if when I do my trainer battles just for the daily reward, like I try to do whatever I can to not have to use a charge move, because I'm just going to get some random trainer for reward. But something
like...
to go ahead.
It just sounds like nobody really had enjoyment from furiously tapping their phone at a like it's a pretty high rate. If you want to get the 3 rings, which is like the max damage, like that takes a lot of gumption. It takes a lot of effort. Like there's not a lot of people that can just do that for hours, but they might want to play the game for hours. I've had people, I'm like, hey, want to practice? They're like, no, I've already practiced a lot. My arm hurts today. I'm like, that's the only reason you don't want to play? Like, that sucks. So changing it to just anything, really, like a little swipey game or something, I don't know. But, like, that sounds cool. It is great,
I'm a bit excited for this feature, if I'm honest, because, if I were to, end on a somber note, we could drill into this issue, but I really hope that this is something that's a higher priority for them, and I'm surprised that they didn't introduce it here, because it might have even overshadowed a little bit of this switch out situation, because it's really more of a circumstance that us, the meta, and like really go in depth are using this fast switching. Kakuna, I had a question for you specifically. A week ago, roughly a week ago, we covered well in depth your update within your simulations. We talked about piggybacking. It's a very interesting stream for those of you listening. You could go ahead and check it out. It was very, very informative. Even to me, like I was just listening in on it, and it was very, very interesting. What's changed with these new mechanics rolling out? Is any of that just rendered pointless, or are there any big differences in your simulator?
Yeah, so there aren't big changes on the current site, because switching isn't really something the simulations have dealt with up to this point. But I'm definitely eagerly watching the updated mechanics to see how those unfold, let's say.
I think switching would be very hard to implement in like any type of simulation.
Well, I think there were some changes to the fast moves, and I might be wrong on that, but there might have been a change on the way fast moves were registered, or am I completely off on this?
There was a little bit of talk about that, yeah. But Flark and Garrett and I looked into that more, and it seems to be the same as it ever was. So no changes on that front, at least.
Which
I
don't like.
There are a couple of bugs we found, like that were certainly strange. That I'm actually not going to publicly disclose. It's going to be hard for people to find it with certain moves, but it like the game with certain moves in certain circumstances. So That should be better saved for like a bug reporting, and so it doesn't tournament play. But yeah, aside from that, it looks like everything's processed in the same way. The game engine, I don't think fundamentally altered at all.
Yeah. So aside from the major meta shakedown that Wigglytuff is causing, for the most part, your simulations are going to be accurate for jungle.
Hashtag
So
Yumta.
hashtag what?
Hashtag Yumta.
Oh yeah.
It's from an old Pokemon spin-off game with Wigglytuff. It's
Right.
hilarious.
Yeah, shiny Wigglytuff stock might have gone up for sure. So,
Can we,
to sort of wrap
can
this
we-
up. Oh yeah, what's up?
Oh, I just feel like I remember asking about the buffs and debuffs failing or disappearing when you switch. I remember asking like we talked a lot about was it intended or not, but I'm just curious, like, do people actually like it more? Like, do they like it when the buffs and debuffs persist, or do they like it when they go away? I mean, like,
It's hard to
kinda
tell.
curious.
I think for me, I just got used to it, and so I developed my strategy play around it.
So this is one of those situations where like
Yeah.
a change was made, but it's kind of like, we'll take it either way. Like there's no objectively obvious like way that anybody's really leaning towards it. It's like you're
Yeah.
just moving things around. It's fine.
Time will tell on those. I mean, it's the same thing when you shake up the energy and damage output of certain moves. You know, perhaps your strategy really revolved around, I don't know, Pound being a really good move on your Legacy Clefable, and then suddenly PvP rolls out, and you're like, damn, you know, like I don't know. I'm just making stuff up at this point, but there's
That's
always
fair.
going to be some heartburn over any change. But to sort of, I guess, wrap this up, I really do want to push this on a more positive note, and that's like the kind of change that we could bring collectively. And I think that is to propose, you know, this counter suggestion that came from our community, right? Chari Bazard, aka Buto, he's one of our longtime members on Go Stadium, and he came up with that design. I think as a group, we can all agree that that would be like a really cool feature. It would help casuals. It's super easy to understand. Oh, there's Toxicroak. I want to use Toxicroak because Toxicroak is going to be better than insert whatever against what my Azumarill is fighting right now. So, you know, with that being said, we will be via Twitter sending out a petition or a vote of some sort. So be on the lookout for that. And, you know, what you can do as a community individually is tweet the hashtag SavePVP and tag at Pokemon Go app, at Niantic Labs. You can tweet them, and eventually they might take notice in our suggestion when we pump out exactly what we're counter suggestion. And with that being said, I do want to say, don't bombard Niantic support. Don't report this as like a glitch, because those guys are like, you know, they're hired to do a specific job, and so they don't have control over what features Pokemon Go, much less PvP, is going to have. So they don't have that kind of authority. And then you're just going to sort of provoke them into answering stuff that sometimes might just be incorrect information. So that's just not the way to provoke any kind of change at overmax capacity. So yeah, tweet at hashtag SavePVP and mention at Niantic Labs, mention at Pokemon Go app, and we'll be sending out our suggestion very, very soon. And I just want to thank all of you guys for jumping in the call on such short notice. It's been a real awesome experience. I'll hand it off to Quartz here so he can close out and thank our patrons.
Hello. Just realized that my mic was muted on OBS, so I might have to repeat
Oh
that.
dear. We could hear you, but they
Yeah,
couldn't hear you.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Now you can hear me. Sorry about that. So yeah, thanks again, guys, for watching. Thanks again, AJ, for hosting the stream. We had a lot of good discussion tonight. So yeah, we're just on screen as usual. The end of stream. We're gonna thank all the patrons for the support, and also we probably hit another milestone for our Twitch subscribers. So we have probably unlocked another emote. So we're going to send out maybe a suggestion on Discord for the current Twitch subscribers to see what kind of emotes you guys would like for us to commission next. But I think the Hunter GG emote will be moved to tier 1 after tonight, and it will probably take a few days for pending approval. But as usual, we will be sending the support on Twitch via raid to Sassafras, who's doing some looks like some battles, either raiding or some shiny hunting. So again, use hashtag SavePvP on Twitter, and be on the lookout. We'll be asking for more suggestions on ways that we can try to reach out. I see a lot of people asking us trying to reach out to the influencers directly. If we have a way to do that, we definitely will. And thanks to our guests, Matt Soar as well, and Flark, Caleb. Let me see if everyone is still here. Mason as well. Brandon for copying in, and Kakuna from PvP. Yeah, we've got a good crowd, so go say hi to Sassafras. We've raided him a few times, I think. Really chill guy, so go show him support. Thanks for watching tonight, and we'll see you for Friday night fights on Friday. More jungle battle, and you get to see if Beagle managed to learn the new switch mechanics by Friday. All right. And stream has ended, I think. Yes.